Yeah, dude.
Uh, yeah, I think Oblivion's worth going back and playing, but I don't know if you can truly like get the same sense of magic if you didn't play it when it first came out, because it does look like crap.
Yeah. Well, dude, I just got a PS5 and it's wild like how good it looks. Like,
Yeah, sorry. It it's very alluring. I think I'm gonna get a PS5 soon, particularly for that Helldivers game.
dude, I have that game and I haven't played it a lot because I've been stuck between there's a football like an NCAA football game and then God of War Ragnarok. God of War Ragnarok is
Oh yeah.
so good.
Yeah,
So,
I know a few people who've been raving about that one.
but yeah, video
It's
games,
just
man.
weighing it up with the major time suck that it becomes, because
Dude.
I've got a
Yep.
problem with moderating the gaming when I get into it, particularly for like those big open world games.
I
Um,
I felt guilty last night because I was gonna like go play it and I'm like, no, like do something else.
mhm.
But it is, man, this is the thing. It's been funny because like I sleep better when I like game for a little while before I go to bed. Like that's one thing I've noticed is like it just helps me just put down the day. So I don't know. But I
Yeah, I
gotta
think
like
it
rein it in.
depends on like that wasn't the case for me when I was playing Call of Duty online with my friends, and you would be like in a rage over losing a game. But if I'm playing something like, an RPG where it's all like very chill and whimsical music and go and save the wizard from the tower or whatever, that's kind of a nice thing to unwind to at nighttime.
Yeah, I'm
But
with you.
yeah. So tell me a little bit about what's been going on with you, since it's been a while since I had you on the podcast. I think I was on yours more
You're on
recently.
mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were like one of my first three or four people, I think.
Yeah, I was
Man,
honored.
so I don't know if I had announced it, but like my wife's pregnant, which is
Oh,
good.
congratulations.
Thank you. So there's a new level of existential angst. Just now we're bringing in another person into the world and the world is scary and chaotic, right? But I turned 36 last week. So I'm like also I think I was okay for a few days. Like, I don't know, my birthday, it is like a reminder. It's like you're getting older and I don't feel bad. I'm much healthier and I honestly don't look like super old. I'm probably look like old right now.
You don't look 36 anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. So that's good, right? Whatever that means. I said somebody like one of my buddies or a guy I went to high school looks like he's like 50. And I'm like, damn, I was talking to somebody the other day and but yeah, and then I mean I'm just riding the waves of entrepreneurship and content creation. I'm just gonna be honest, like because I think it's good to talk about this stuff. Like the last 2 days I've been like relatively low from like an energy standpoint and like just like
Today,
I
yesterday was
think
the least productive day I've had in terms of motivation to work on that sort of stuff in a long time. Yeah.
dude, it's and I do you ever feel like when you're low, like the rest of the world is low too? Because like I felt like everybody yesterday was just like in a fog. But
Yeah, or well, I find I tend to yeah, like I think so much of this stuff is analogous with other stuff, and in terms of like I find a lot of the stuff that I say to clients about issues they're encountering with training or nutrition, it all carries over to everything else in life. And it's kind
yeah.
of like how people can get into a slump with their training and start comparing themselves to other people, being like, oh, well, it looks like they're getting great results and their training is going great. And I think the same thing can happen to you with the content creation game. And it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to forget that the number one thing that underpins anybody who get results is that they've been doing it consistently for a long time, and they probably have had a lot of really bad days that you just haven't seen or known about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the number one thing, and like the number one thing
And I
is,
mean, you're sorry, just not to cut across you, but like you've had great growth in your Instagram since
yeah,
last time I even like looked at your follower accounts. I mean, That must
I
be
got
a
a
solid
I
3,000 people in the last year.
I got a big pop from like one post that wasn't ever really gonna get me like customers per se, but it did. It just, and it's funny because it's like I still have it pinned. It's like a squats help you get off your toilet when you're older. Deadlifts will help you pick up your grandkids. Pressing will help you reach for the cookie jar. Like it's
Yeah.
not just exercises, right? And I got like 62,000 likes from that. And like, you know, a lot of my content is still relatively niche and stuff. And
Whoa, yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at that now. Jesus, that's a shitload of likes.
yeah, and it's like, why did that one pop off? I did that on Valentine's Day, and it was
Yeah.
Father John Misty's like "Real Love" was the song on it, but like,
Oh yeah,
dude,
yeah. Love that song.
you know, it's just it's a monster that you don't really know what the heck's really going on, but it's I think one of the things I think about when it comes to like training, and then the analogy to like other stuff is like you think people are like just breezing through it
Hmm.
like even and like and it's like no, like everybody has the days they don't want to do it. Everybody has the days that
Yeah.
like the weights feel heavy. You know how many times like you know how many times people are posting about that shit? Very little,
Yeah.
right? And the other thing about like, dude, I think about this like when you are doing it alone, you only have your energy to manage, which is
Yeah.
fine, right? But like if you are on like a team, like when I played team sports growing up, like there would be so many days where I'd just be like, you know, wouldn't want to go practice, but like your buddies kind of have some energy, right?
Hmm.
And that like that is infectious to some extent. Or you have coaches there who are like, let's freaking go, and you know, you
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
you snap yourself out of it. But like yesterday I didn't want to do jack squat. So like I rode the bike and I was supposed to compete in an Olympic lifting meet this weekend. And I'm not going to do it because my groin is I pissed off my groin and I've just continuously irritated it because I can't take my
Mhm.
own advice. But
Only
I
we
did
can.
like squat. I did like this the form of squatting that I can tolerate, and I did some like Jefferson deadlifts,
Yeah.
and then I freaking called it good. And I
Yeah.
like I was that's all you do. And like at least I showed up, you know. But
Absolutely.
people would be like, ah, but that was off program or X, Y. The amount of perfectionism, and I think this is one of those topics that you want to talk.
Yeah.
The amount of perfectionism in like everybody's demeanor anymore,
Hmm.
like, is wild. Like, if you don't have a perfect day one day,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
it's like you've effed up the whole
Hmm.
thing, right?
Well, I think I feel like we talk about this stuff to death, but it's very easy to forget that it's not something that not only does the average person who's just kind of like trying to get a little bit fitter, they don't do it, but even people like ourselves can forget about the importance of the basics and keeping things as simple as possible. And I'm sure you've had this before, but like I can't get over how much of the problems that people encounter just come back to things that are as simple as just showing up consistently. And people love to kind of pay lip service to that and say, "Oh yeah, 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 I know, like I am going to be doing that." But assuming that I am doing that, what about all of this stuff? And it's like, well, hold on. Why are we assuming that you're doing that? Because if you miss, like I'm working on an ebook at the moment that's about like how to diagnose why you're not making progress, like breaking through plateaus. And
Yeah,
the very first thing that I have in there, um, so I'm ranking them in order of likelihood, is that you're just not being consistent enough. You're not showing up often enough. And
yeah,
people don't really understand how important that is. Like I remember one of the strongest guys I've ever trained with, one time showed up to the weightlifting gym that he was in his I think it was like slacks and a shirt and like a button-up formal shirt. And I think somebody lent him a pair of shorts because he'd forgotten his gym gear that day. But the
yeah,
difference with that guy's mindset was that like missing his session wasn't a negotiable thing in his head. It was just like, oh, I'm gonna have to be a little bit careful not to pop all the buttons in my shirt here today when I'm working out, you know?
yeah,
But until you
yeah,
get to that point where like that's not even a negotiable thing in your head, the idea of trying to find the perfect program or comparing barbell bench press to dumbbell bench press. It's just so meaningless.
And even then, like, depending on your goals, like, who gives a rip about if you hit like 3 sets of barbell bench press or dumbbell bench press
Mhm.
within like 3 reps of failure, it's probably like the same general stimulus, right?
Yeah,
Like who like
unless you're going
it's
to be powerlifting or something.
there's so much there's so much like randomness. So I'm reading Fooled by Randomness, which is a Nassim Taleb book, like the guy who wrote Anti-Fragile, right?
Oh, I haven't
And
heard that one. I did
dude,
love
it's
Anti-Fragile though.
I also probably shouldn't his writing and his books probably make me somewhat depressed because like I my biggest wave of depression came after reading like Anti-Fragile and another one because I was just like, oh shit, we're so screwed.
Uh-huh.
Um, but like there's so much intraday variability in the micro. There's so much variability that the only way to manage that variability is to just track it for longer periods of time.
Yeah.
And like in the gym, it's like being consistent, right?
Yeah.
And probably, your ebook is like, I'm with you. Like the things that I think matter the most are consistency, clarity of what we're trying to do,
Mhm.
right? Because that's probably my biggest one is when I don't have something to train for, and that's probably a little bit my angst right now is
Yeah.
I can't do this Olympic lifting meet. I can't squat the way I want to because it's my groin is pissed off and it's frustrating because
Yeah.
like if I was doing those things, it would be like these are the clear things you need to take, right? These are the clear action steps, right? But most people just what they lack clarity, so they're looking for optimization. Because if they give themselves the perfect, then it will take care of the fact that they don't really know what they want. Like
Yeah.
do you want to be super jacked? Do you want to get super strong?
I
Because
find,
I think you can train everything at once,
mhm.
but dude, I also think like the reason that periodization makes sense for people is like it gives them a 4 to 6 to 8 week period of like this is what we're doing for this, and then
Yes.
it's gonna switch. So you're not gonna get bored, right? And it gives them a bunch of clarity. Whereas if like you're kind of in like this GPP like phase all the time, you're just training, which they're both just training, right? But like the other big thing that I think people need is just for us to call it something.
Yeah.
Like this is your intensification phase. What the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so
Right?
to go back to like, I think there's a difference between like training general physical preparedness or training in like a hybrid type way and training in a way that's directionless. Like I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive because you could be training a lot of things at once and still have goals. And depending on what the
Yeah.
goals are, they might actually coincide or complement each other quite well. So you could say, like, right, in this next block of training, I'm trying to improve my body composition a little bit. I'm trying to get my 5K run time down slightly, and I want to get more body weight pull-ups in a row than I ever had before. And depending on the person's level of advancement, it is possible that they could make some kind of progress with all of those three goals in the space of say 4 to 8 weeks.
Hmm.
And that's very different. And then like likewise, you could have somebody who's very much like just working on strength training, but they have a very vague goal of like, I just want to get a bit stronger over this next training block. And I think the main thing is you have to have some kind of like a picture of like, you know, the ideal Dave or the ideal Killian that we're striving towards, and actually like putting some words around what that is and descriptors to be able to shoot for it.
Dude, I vision boards and are like and constant reminders of like what you're after are
Mm,
just huge, right? And dude, the other big part about it is just like when I will have a dramatically different session based on like if I'm just being intentional in that 45 to 60 minute time
yeah.
versus like if I am just trying to like go through the motions, right?
Hmm.
And I don't think, honestly, some days you are just going to go through the motions. But like and this is one of the reasons that I think it's advantageous to have rest days or
Mm,
have other hobbies is because like coming off of a day where I don't really do any training and like this is what I'm gonna do today. Like I'm just more focused. Where if I'm like, oh, I've been like trying to push really hard, you're just
Yeah.
like you start to get into that sandbagging mentality, right? And there's so many aspects to all of it, but I do think there needs to be clarity of like vision of like, yeah, who are you trying to become? And that's one of the things that resonates with me about like I do get philosophical because like when it comes to like there's so many different strategies that
Mm.
can work, but like what ultimately matters for a lot of people is just like who the hell do you want to be, like,
Yeah.
and what do you want to be capable of doing, right? Because that's gonna guide the overarching process a
Hmm.
lot more than, hey, do lengthen partials build muscle better than freaking normal reps? It's like
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care. I
Yeah.
just want
I
people to
definitely know.
freaking do some curls and do some chin ups, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
there's also just something about like, me and you both like Jim Windler a lot because uh he's just kind of evolved into um the guy that's just speaking like super simple, like relatively
Mm.
non-dogmatic
Yeah.
like training advice. Um and he's also like he he just is like,
He's like Mark Ripto if he just reined it in a little bit every now and then.
yeah, right. He's not catering like Mark Rubisso just started to cater to like the extreme side of his
Yeah.
like political and
Hmm.
uh like other aspects of it that I just didn't care about listening to,
Hmm.
right? But the other thing that Windler's talking about more often is just like athletic development, right? As opposed to just strength. Like I listened to a
Yeah.
couple things from Windler and it's like, you know, like a lot of the kids that they're working with, it's they need to be strong, but they don't need to be like maximally strong. They need to be able to go play football well,
Yeah.
right? Or they need to go play their sport well. And like that requires you to run. That
Hmm.
requires you to,
Yeah.
have endurance and to have lungs. And like that's the other thing. It's I get very lost in the sauce of like, I gotta push up my XYZ. And it's like
Hmm.
some of the most enjoyable, like me going for a run is like very very enjoyable. I love running and like
Yeah.
I stopped doing it in because I like was listening to other people, right?
Mm.
And that is one aspect of like my fitness in the past like 5 to 10 years that I regret was not continuing to like do some amount of running and sprinting, because getting
Yeah.
back into running and sprinting after a layoff from it, especially sprinting, has been
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Like,
Sprinting, particularly as you get older, becomes very difficult to do without like pulling a hamstring or something like that.
yeah,
To go back to what you were saying there about how important it is to have clarity around what are the actual goals that we're shooting for. That's something that I feel like was a major game changer in my own coaching service. It's a real kind of like cornerstone of what I try to do with the online stuff. People now that there's a weekly reflection on what they're doing. There's every 4 weeks then there's a kind of like a broader reflection on like what goals are we shooting for? Have we moved towards the ones that we set out? I find the people who struggle the most to get into training are the ones that they really struggle to kind of like drill down to like the why of why they're training beyond like really vague stuff. Like I want to get a
yeah,
little bit stronger, I want to do this, that, the other. Um, do you think that that's maybe just like a little bit of fear around like once you have really illuminated what it is that you're shooting for, you can now also very clearly see if you don't get there, and it's that fear of failing basically. Because if you got all these vague goals that it's like I just want to get a little bit fitter, yeah, 8 weeks went by, some things went up, some things went down. I think I might have got a little bit fitter, but like I never said that I want to be able to lift this weight on this exercise.
yeah, dude. I think there's a legitimate, because it's like business. Like if you
Yeah.
go when you declare you're in business, there's no turning back. Like when people
Mm.
know you have a business and then like if you have to stop being in business, you have to go out
Yeah.
of business. It's like, oh shit. Like people know, right?
Mm.
And the reality is like nobody really cares at the end of the day. Like, yeah, people might talk
Yeah.
shit for a little bit, but there is something about when you do have clarity of what you want, then you actually have to go after it,
Mhm.
right? Um, as a kid, I thought I did. I won't say I thought I did. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, but why I wanted to be a Navy SEAL was because they were just like the most badass dudes on the planet, and I had a
Mhm.
giant badass complex. I thought they were the most badass dudes on the planet, and don't get me wrong, they probably are. But um, like I like the idea of it,
Yeah.
but the actual things to do, like join the military. I didn't have and it wasn't, I'm not going to blame this on my family, but like we didn't have like a military pedigree. So like me joining
Right.
the military was like nobody in my family was really in support of that. Right.
Sure.
Um, like, so the micro version of this is like, so the macro is like my family didn't want me to do it. Right. I was confused. I didn't know exactly what I wanted. And I went to college. Right. And then when you go to college, it's like, okay, you're going to be like an officer in the military, or do you even want to do this? And then it became, then by that time I was 24 and I'm like, I'm too old for this, even though I'm
Mhm.
not. Right. So, but the micro version of that is like, I think our ego really is always trying to protect us from like pain.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you do get clarity on like your goals and then you can fail, like,
Mhm.
because, you know, hey, I want to squat 500 pounds. And like, that's a great goal, but you could fail it. You could get to 405 and be like, yeah, actually I don't want to keep going.
And
And
interestingly, you'll probably be stronger than if you'd never set that goal. You
100%, right?
might have stopped at 315 if you'd never set the 500-pound goal.
Well, and a lot of times I really do think this more and more. It's just a matter of, if you do have that goal, it's just a matter of time,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, yes, you're going to see really world-class powerlifters who do it in a short amount of time,
Mm.
right? But like you don't know their genetics, you don't know their training history. Like
Yeah.
I have a guy on my roster who's so freaking strong.
Yeah.
And he came to me because his girlfriend was on my roster and she's gotten a lot stronger. And he just his coach, like I looked at the program and it's like, God, this is just such a beat down, like all year round. You were just getting beat
Mm.
down. And we just stripped away like the fatigue from it and just took away a lot of the needless stuff, and his numbers just jumped, right? And so he had built a ton of work capacity, but he had not been able to perform.
Mhm.
And the reason that matters is because it's like, well, I looked at, he's been consistent, he showed up, done the work even when it sucked, because he was like, yeah, a lot of this I hated doing, but I just kept doing it. um and a lot of people won't do that. Like even me right now, I'm kind of I'm between like what the hell do I want to do, and it's kind of hard to decide. There's going to be squatting and hinging and
Mhm.
pressing and that type of stuff in my program, but the cool thing about coaching people who want to do powerlifting is if they set a meet up, exactly like, okay, we're 16 weeks out, let's just walk backwards from that. And if you do a pretty good job, people are going to PR. I
Yeah.
honestly do that. I think that in general, like if they're not a head case about like what they're trying to do,
Yeah.
if you
If
just
they're not
go and
willing
have
to
fun,
like just check to see what their one rep max in the deadlift is a week before.
yeah, we're we're on the right spot, right? Just drop some fatigue and don't be a dipshit to yourself. Like don't be a
I mean,
dickhead to yourself.
I remember I think it was maybe like the third powerlifting meet I'd ever done. So I was still very new to it, but like I kind of had a rough idea of how to prepare and the rules and everything. And there was another coach in the gym that I was in at the time who decided to train for it with me. And this guy was like significantly stronger than me by at least kind of 20 kilos on each lift. But he just didn't have any plan at all for what to do with the prep for us. And I remember it was like a few days before the meet, and we were doing a deadlift workout together. And he was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna check my one rep max, so like I know kind of what to shoot for on the day." And I was like, "What? Isn't that what the meet is for, though?" And he was like, "Oh, no, no, it's just so like I have an idea." I'm like, "Okay, you're gonna be like recovered for that though, like to be able to lift more than that on the day." And he just didn't get that, and it was like a combination of that and not practicing the the lift commands and
Commands.
everything on
Yeah.
that. And I ended up outlifting the guy through like utter bullshit of me just knowing the rules better and how to manage the last kind of couple weeks before the meet that bit better. So yeah, like as long I think powerlifting, it's almost so simple that people need to find ways to make it more entertaining and exciting by just unnecessarily overcomplicating it. Like to be able, compared to other sports like, you know, rugby, American football, where like you have, a full season of games and you don't know when to peak for because you don't know if you're going to make the finals of a championship or not, or get knocked out in pool stages or whatever. So to be able to know, like, I'm competing 3 times this year at these exact dates, and this is when I need to be at my strongest, like, you couldn't have a more ideal scenario for strength training.
Dude, isn't it? It's kind of crazy because like rugby is like one of the most complex games ever, and it's like, but training for it's like relatively simple, right? They make it relatively simple, right? And powerlifting is one of the most simple sports,
Mm.
and people make it so freaking complicated,
This is
right? And I'm not
boring. Like
saying,
it's pretty boring, the training for
dude,
it compared to everything else.
it's kind of the like it's kind of I will do another powerlifting meet at some point in time. I do like enjoy those. I enjoy prepping for them to some extent, but I mean it's just people's ego. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
lift, I'm gonna I'm gonna win this local thing, and that's good. Like hey, I'm glad that you're competing and stuff like that. And I'm not a super good power lifter, mostly because I just have I think ADHD and I just want to switch tasks all the time, right?
Yeah.
But it really is. I every time I go coach at a powerlifting meet or lift at a powerlifting meet, it's always amazing to me to see like how how unprepared some people still are for like,
People who are like
hey,
missing their first attempts and
when you
stuff.
miss your first attempt, it's like, all right, we jacked that up because you
Yeah.
should not miss your first attempt
Yeah.
on any of the lifts. Like if you go 3 for 9, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Right? Like but you make your first attempt and then you miss your second too because you just made some weird jumps or you were going for
Mhm.
PRs or XYZ. Like I can kind of understand that, right? 6 for 9 is probably a really good goal for most people. It's like, oh yeah, I hit something close to my PR or I PR'd my second and I want to do something else. But like
Mhm.
when people go in and they miss their first attempts or they like grind their first attempt,
Oh
they're like,
yeah.
we're screwing this up. So yeah, it's kind of. Do you think that like most of it just boils down to like how simple are you willing to make it and how like that is one of the awesome things about and like we can go back like 531 gets shit on right in like powerlifting and it's not really a powerlifting
Yeah.
program so let's be honest but like I think about this on a regular basis. It's like it's probably one of the funnest programs that I have ever run from
Yeah.
the AMRAP portion of it, the like the ability to kind of tweak it and do what you want. Like that's
Yeah.
probably once we have a kid here, that's probably going to be the thing I go to is just some variation of that.
Two years
And
old, buddy. Time to get in the gym. You've had
yeah,
your
not with the kid, with me, but yeah. But like it was just it's simple and there's kind of like there's enough structure to provide you with like barrier like guidelines
Hmm.
but enough freedom and like you can tweak it and if it's not going anywhere at all like you're tweaking it too much but
Yeah.
if you do it kind of right you're gonna make progress and you're gonna have fun and you're gonna be fit and
I
strong.
I think it's great, and I think that most of the criticism that it gets is basically it's not perfect. So it's
Hmm.
like 531 is a terrible program to run, once you figured out like all of this individual stuff that you need, and now this template isn't perfect for you anymore. Yeah, well, like that's literally nobody on the face of the planet can write a program that's meant to be delivered to the broader population and guarantee that it's going to work, as optimally as possible for everybody. But, having tried to write a few programs now that I could basically make as a template and give to people for free when they ask me for a good program to write, it's really damn hard to write a program that is intelligently put together while also being simple enough that you could be confident that the person reading it will be able to understand it and implement it properly. And that's why
Dude,
like programs like Starting Strength are so popular because it's distilled down to something that's so easy to communicate to somebody. Is it ideal to just go in and add 5 pounds, like this arbitrary number to the bar every time that you go in? No, because obviously there's going to be days where you feel crap. But like the fact that the average person can understand that, and it's so much better than them just going in and not changing their weights at all or not doing like the basic compound stuff. And then I think 531 takes that um one step further in terms of an even better approach where it's like now you have an exact plan telling you the exact numbers to do. You're kind of forced to regularly push yourself on those AMRAP sets so that you're getting used to experiencing what getting close to failure is. And then there's all other things worked in there in terms of like if you stop making progress, there's some
yeah.
uh, a go-to in place in terms of like, oh, we're going to make the training max a bit lighter, or you're going to do the boring but big thing for a while or whatever. And I think we could actually do with more of that in the strength training industry, whatever you want to call it, of like copy paste templates that we actually come up with really good troubleshooting stuff for what the average person is going to encounter so that we can give them that.
I mean, dude, I have written a few programs. So because a lot of okay, so I have people who are powerlifters, and then I have people who just want to get stronger.
Mhm.
Both of them, so like powerlifters, it's just more of a there is some undulation based, and this is the other thing I'm trying to make a differentiation with, but like there's undulation based on like when they're going to compete. Like,
Mhm.
so, you always got to manage volume and intensity, right? And the closer they get to their meet, the more it's going to be specific to one rep maxes of squat, bench, deadlift, right?
Mm.
But like general, this is the other big thing. Like all of the models we have for training are just incomplete. Like they're like, um, effective reps. Effective reps is one of the models that I'm trying to like just kind of make help people understand because it's like, hey, because a lot of people just they do struggle with RPE, right? They struggle with reps in reserve. I was at 2 or was that I don't know if I could have done 2 or 3. The thing about it is it kind of doesn't matter over the aggregate, right? But like, hey, did that set like was it effective? Was it providing a stimulus, right? Yes. And that's the kind of the thing like that AMRAPs guarantee you do.
Mm. Yeah.
And the trickiness of because I did an AMRAP yesterday of like press, and it's like, should I have cut it like 1 rep shy of where I did because like
Yeah.
I overexerted myself? Like it kind of doesn't matter, like in the aggregate,
Mm.
right? But a lot of times when I'm trying to make like a generic program, because I've been influenced by starting strength and because I've been influenced in 531, and then I've been influenced by like barbell medicine and Mike to share type of stuff, it really just becomes like we are going to go from like tens 8, 6, 4, 2 over the course of like a 6 week period. And
Mhm.
then like switch if depending on who you are and what you want to do, like you could just do that again, just
Yeah.
slightly change the variation of the lift you're doing, or change the like, if you're safety bar squatting or front squatting or back squatting, like your legs are still going to get strong,
Yeah.
right? And I think like I have a power lifter right now who like she wants to be super super specific, but I'm like you getting good at front squatting is going to make your back squat go up in the aggregate, like over time. And that's okay. Right. But people get so married to like these ideas of like what's optimal or what's perfect that they don't just explore strength. Like,
Yeah.
get good. I have a hard time believing that like improving on weaknesses is not going to make you a better lifter in the aggregate. Right.
Yeah.
Especially when we do need to fine tune things. And like, why 531 and starting strength are so they were so massively adopted is yes, like you said, because you could read them, you could read that template and be like, all right, I know what I'm doing for the next 4 to
Mm.
6 to 8 weeks.
And
right?
people like what you forget about it is like it was only when I sat down myself to try to write something like that of my own that I started realizing like, oh, this is why they did it that way.
Yeah,
Because, you know, as simple as those programs are, people still fuck them up all the time. People
yeah,
still do starting strength and try to make 10 or 20 pound jumps on their bench press and then wonder
yeah,
why they've stalled out. People still do 5-3-1 and they ignore the advice to use nothing heavier than a 90% training max, or
yeah,
they start trying to combine it with another program or whatever. And so, like, anytime you start trying to make stuff that little bit more optimal by, even trying to bring in, like, say, like a reps and reserve element or something like that, your odds of people screwing the program up have now gone up drastically. And they're probably going to screw it up in a way that is going to violate such a basic principle like recovery or something like that, that any little benefit you might have got from optimizing it has now gone out the window. Um, and so that's why I feel like you can only really work on that stuff with people in a one-on-one capacity, or if you're doing
yeah.
like small group personal training or something like that. Because if you're just gonna like make something, send it out to the world for thousands of people to try, you really have to assume that people are gonna mess it up big time.
Yeah. I mean, and that's like, I take it for granted that people, especially like relatively newer lifters, are just going to screw up. They're going to screw up the program for
Mm,
periods of time. Like, and it's not even screwing it up. It's just like, what probably matters is like decent technique.
mm,
Like, is your technique decent? Right. And this is kind of my biggest, the thing that took me away from the starting strength crowd the most is like, I honestly don't think like harping on people's technique is the way to improve technique. And that's what it just seemed like a lot of it was like, we're just going to be super micromanagey with technique coaching.
yeah,
And we're going to make technique like the emphasis of how we coach and like
right.
what our philosophy is. Whereas like, honestly, the best way to help people with technique is to use a variation that like challenges their position and posture in a way that is going to help them in the overarching like pattern they're trying to
Yeah.
improve, or just literally just, hey, let's lighten the load enough so that you can be successful, and then like your last 2 reps you get a little bit of form
Mhm.
breakdown, and then be like, yeah, so your first 3 reps are money, like that's what we
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
have happen, and these last two, like this is probably the sweet spot, right? But like, it's really, this is why. Do you follow Will Rattel now?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not like super closely or anything, but I'll see the odd video of his pop up talking about Olympic lifts and stuff like that.
Y- Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of like, I talked to Will a couple weeks ago on my podcast, and um, you know, he believes in like the Olympic lifts for problem solving and stuff like that, and he's a beast, right? But
Mm.
the programs that he's written and that he puts out, like he has a concurrent training program on Train Heroic. It's like there's just so much variability that like people like you and me can like start to understand his programming method, right? Okay, like, why are we doing um a deficit deadlift this week, or a regular deadlift? Because at the end of the day, like it's just a stimulus, right?
Yeah.
But like the average person who just wants to go to the weight room and get a little bit stronger, like they giving them that much variability is too much, right? And they're
Mhm.
not going to develop the repetition and the understanding. So you got to keep it like simpler, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, basically, dude, what the internet has become. So I don't like, I'm just gonna laugh at this too, because like Angus Bradley, who I've been working with, who I really like, Angus, is like currently
Yeah.
feuding with whatever his name is, Atlas Power
Oh
Stroke.
yeah. I
And
see
it's
he's
like,
using the Conor McGregor marketing strategy there.
dude, 100%.
Yeah.
I think it's just drama for the sake of drama.
Yeah.
But they're just arguing about like shit that for 99% of people just
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
And I'm sure he knows that. I think it's a little bit tongue
Oh
in
yeah.
cheek, you know.
Yeah.
He
100%.
knows his upper body is not the same size as what's the guy Atlas Power Shrugged.
Yeah. Well, and even then it doesn't really matter because everybody's got their own freaking goals, right?
Yeah.
Like Angus surfs,
Hmm.
and he Olympic lifts and stuff like that. And Atlas is like a self-proclaimed like parking lot bodybuilder. Like those are
Yeah.
very different stimuli. That's the other big thing we can talk about is like you're comparing yourself to that person when you don't have the same goals as them,
Yeah.
right? And like you're not doing the same things as them, and like that's just silly, right? But that's the age we live in, right?
And also, like I don't think, you know, one thing that I've said to a lot of people sometimes, I think you were starting to talk there about like some of the downsides of the internet with people kind of getting lost in the sauce a little bit. There's so many contradicting voices and um opinions on the ways in which people should be doing things. Um Oftentimes I just say to people, there can be a lot to be gained in the beginning stage by just picking a person who seems to know what they're doing. And even if they don't have the most perfect way of doing every single aspect of training, the value of just having a singular voice to listen to and sticking to whatever plan they have long enough to get results, and then learning what does and doesn't work within that, you're going to make way more progress than, let's say you start with starting strength, and Mark Rippetoe has some very strong opinions on stuff. Even though I
Mhm.
don't agree with everything that he says with some of the more dogmatic takes, there's nothing in what he does that I think is going to be a hurdle to somebody getting some very good beginner gains. Whereas if they do like a couple of weeks of starting strength and then they see, I don't know, maybe like Angus has a post talking about how stupid it is to not let your knees go past your toes or sink the squats all the way down, it then becomes like, oh, maybe I should be squatting that way. And then they're going to spend a few weeks relearning how to squat and go deeper. And then they'll find the West Side stuff, and the West Side stuff says do it with a wide stance to a box against bands. It's like, oh, I need to change my squat again. And if they had just stuck with one of those methods that is potentially imperfect in its own way for a full year, they'd still be further along than if they were chopping and changing who they're following. And I don't know what your opinion is on this, but I just think there's a lot of value to just picking someone that you really believe in, who's obviously not like a charlatan, and just going with their imperfect way of doing things long enough to figure out if it works for you or not.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I honestly think that's probably the key of like why working with a coach and just like trusting them
Yeah.
is advantageous. Because if you just stick with if somebody's methods are grounded in principles of, hey, progression, right? Um the other big thing is like everybody wants to train like 6 days a week. Like, and I'm okay, I'm cool with like not everybody, but a lot of people do. Like, and I'm okay with like activity, right? Just realize that everything you do has some amount of a cost. Like I went for a bike ride on Sunday. It was awesome. I loved it. I rode trails and stuff. But like, even though that was fun, and I don't think it has a giant effect, and some of it's just between my ears, but like that still has an effect on the week ahead, right? And so you just have to take that into account, right?
Yeah.
Um, but just following principles, having somebody tell you this is what you should do,
Yeah.
allowing them to like adjust the program
Yeah.
and um allowing them to assess your results is super super valuable, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I work with like physios and stuff like that. And the problem in the physio world is like there's literally like an exercise and like a like some way to get out of every form of pain or condition there
Yeah.
is. And it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
instead of doing that, like just freaking go for a walk.
Mhm.
Like make it the most general way you can solve that problem possible.
I
Because
think.
what you have happen is just people throwing in all sorts of
Mm,
goop into their stuff and then
yeah.
they're frustrated because it's not working the way they want,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I
So
think a big problem for both strength and conditioning and physiotherapy and like anything related to the human body and fitness, and there's so much stuff that can work. It's not a maths problem where you put in one digit incorrectly and now the whole thing doesn't work. And so the problem for people just seems to be that, like if you take, you were given an example there a few minutes back about somebody who's got something going on in their squat where they struggle to stay upright.
mhm.
Um, because I love simplicity and it's part of my philosophy to always go with the most simple and seemingly most likely solution to a problem, I'm gonna say that we just take weight off the bar and work on not having that thing happen. But
Yeah.
there's other people out there who have a philosophy where they like to use a different exercise, and they might come in and say that the way to fix that is to do front squats for 4 or 6 weeks. And the problem is that both of those things can achieve that exact same thing. And so it's very difficult to kind of parse out what's right and wrong for people because it kind of all can work to some extent, particularly if you believe in it.
Dude, that's like my biggest problem right now is like I kind of have come to this point where, well, everything freaking works in the aggregate. So like what do you want to do? Like what is
Yeah.
the person I'm just trying to help people. I'm trying to help people make like decisions for themselves.
Mm,
And like to some extent that's not what you hire a coach for either, but like it also is kind of why you hire a coach
mm,
because like the goal like wow, I've had people for a really long time and I don't and I'm super grateful for that, right? But a big piece of it is like the better somebody knows how to train and like change
mm.
stuff a little bit, uh the better things can go,
Yeah.
right? But I'm even then I'm like me saying that aloud, I don't know if I've said that aloud, I've just been stewing on it. And like to some extent a lot of the value of having a coach that you trust is just like doing what they tell you to do
Mhm.
like for a long period of time, right? Take
You kind of
away
put your mental energy into training and not having
just
to
put
second guess
yeah,
stuff
hey, I'm
and
gonna do this and
yeah.
I'm gonna go with it, right? And like I do think there's just too many options, right? We've been talking about this. There's just too many options, and it's like just pick one because if you
Yeah.
just trust it, and it's like it's good enough, right? Um, and that's kind of where we need to go with a lot of stuff. Is it is hard to push back against the optimization and the perfection crowd because like most things are just good enough. Like
Yeah.
you want to get better at running the mile. Okay. Like run the mile,
Mhm.
run some sprints, and then run some 800s. And you're probably going to get better at the mile. Is it going to be perfect? No, but it's going
Yes.
to be something that we can tweak over time. Right. So it's, it's, it's analogous to, we kind of started this podcast talking about like life and stuff, but man, it's analogous to every day I wake up and I have a slightly different morning routine. Like,
Mhm.
make coffee, read, journal, but it's never like the perfect thing. It's never the exact same.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there, I think, myself included, who are like, was it because that I did this in this order that my day is not going well? Right.
Mm.
That's superstition. But like that's also like the Huberman effect of, hey, this protocol is going to make you feel good. And then when they don't feel good, they think they effed it
Mm.
up, right?
Yeah.
When in reality, like I'm making waves if you're listening to this, but I'm making waveforms and like there is no up without a rebound and going
Yeah.
back down. There and like that's so many people like I kind of said at the beginning, like I had a couple off days. Yesterday was just an off day.
Mm.
And you can perpetuate that, you can feel about feeling bad or you can just figure out what you need to do to work through it. And like that's what most of training is in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
Is set your rules for yourself, show up, realize that there's a shit ton of variability and that all you can do is your best and try to follow a plan. So,
Yeah, and a big one that I try to take my own advice with it as much as I can, even though it's very difficult. But I definitely try to harp on this with people that I work with is that as cheesy as it sounds, those really are the most important days that determine how much progress you're going to get because most people are going to do a reasonably good job of getting done what they need to get done on a day where they feel like they've got high motivation. um, and then obviously the definition of an average day is one where you get like a medium amount of stuff done. But it's the days where you feel really crap and just don't feel like doing anything and you get down on yourself and you start kind of like getting into negative thought patterns. If you can improve what that version of a crap day looks like for you by even just like ticking off one thing, that moves you in the direction you want to be going in. I think those are the things that really determine the success because those are the times where people like drop off training altogether
Yeah.
and start getting into like a really negative spin of momentum. And if you can actually like pat yourself on the back and say that was like showing up to the gym and doing that one working set of back squats and leaving was actually the thing that made me succeed in this training block. Because if I hadn't have done that, I might have missed a whole week of training after that by just being down on myself.
Yeah. It's the same with like nutrition, right? Like
Yeah.
you do good for a little while. And this is why like ultimately you need to have flexibility built into the plan, right? Because you're gonna you're gonna screw up. Like you're gonna have
Mhm.
more ice cream than you should have, right? You're gonna have that night where you're hungry and you're gonna like eat more food than you should have, like, right? And then just it probably is, this is really cliche, but like just that day tight compartments, like, hey, take it day to day,
Mm.
reset and like begin again is probably the most powerful mindset you can have. Like yeah, because I was like last night I was like low and I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go to bed. And I woke up and got out of bed on time, which I do think matters. Like I sometimes I sleep and I hit snooze, right? Like, but getting out of bed when you feel like you should to do the things you want is helpful, right? Same thing, showing up to the gym when you don't feel great, but like this is the time that you're supposed to go to the gym, right?
Mhm.
Um, with some loose tolerance there. Cause like if you show up to the gym and you just bike for 30 minutes, like,
Yeah.
and your goal is to just show up to the gym, great, right? If your goal is to squat heavy and it's just not there that day, like doing what you can is good, right? But yeah, it's that all I read something about all or nothing thinking last week, and it kind of goes back to like it's trying to keep us safe. Like you're basically, dude, have you ever read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman?
No, but I've heard about it enough that it's on my list.
Yeah, so really quick because I got to bounce for a call in a minute or two
Yeah,
here,
no
but
worries.
like um there's questions that our subconscious brain is just always asking. Like, are we safe? Am I comfortable? Is this easy? Right? Like there's literally like there's probably thousands of those types of questions going on that you're just processing all the time, right? And so then what brings those questions to the level of your consciousness is like basically how much of like a threat we're under, or like how much we need to change to like continue to survive, right? And like the all or nothing mindset, or the hey, I think so much of it is rooted in like kind of our egos survival,
Hmm.
like how it's okay to be, and just our programming. Like our parents want us to be comfortable. Our parents want us to be safe. The world says to be safe, right? Don't do stuff that's hard,
Yeah.
XYZ. And so there, as cliche as a lot of this stuff has become, it is like you do have to lean into on those shitty days, like showing up the best you can. Because you will be so much more, you will be so grateful that you did, because it set you up for where you are when things get good again, right? But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you can't see that when you're in the shit, right? So
Yeah. I think the internet and social media has made us undervalue cliches and things that we've heard lots of times because we assume that novelty must be of higher value. Like somebody who's got
yep,
like a totally new take on what you need to do to succeed.
yep,
Um, when you have this bank of evidence of all these people who've succeeded that are kind of saying similar things when you boil it down to base principles. So it would make
yep.
more sense to put more stock in that than somebody who comes out of left field and says you can get rich in a 4-hour work week or something like that.
100%. Right. And yeah, it's that, is there something new going on is like one of the underlying questions
Mhm.
that our brain is always asking. Like, so novelty is a tremendous bias, but
Yeah.
yeah, dude, I'm with you. This is good. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
It's been great having you on. I won't keep you any longer, but definitely we'll do it again sometime. Where can people find you?
Dave.strength and kindness on Instagram. The Strong and Kind podcast. I'll have you back on my podcast in the not too distant future.
Absolutely.
Um, and yeah, the Strong and Kind podcast is on Spotify and on YouTube. I'm also on YouTube. I think it's just Dave Hagerty. I'm trying to make more long form content. So,
Awesome.
but my coaching service is Strength and Kindness Coaching. So reach out to me there if you need help rehabbing an injury or just want to make progress and want to talk about performance. But appreciate you, man.
Perfect. All right. Great talking to you, Dave. Take care, man.
I
Okay.
see, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
No
Peace.
problem.